I just came to Oklahoma in December. I'm from Kentucky. Did my master's at the University of Kentucky. Go Cats in the Final Four. But it doesn't really matter, I guess. Anyway, I'm in Oklahoma.
Yes,
it does. Okay, thank you. All right. So there I had the opportunity to work on a pretty large-scale rain garden, bioretention. I'm going to use the terms interchangeably, but you know what they mean. And I looked exclusively at the hydrology. We didn't do any water quality work, but they hope to do some of that on that rain garden in the future. Kind of the obligatory preamble to why it matters. Urbanization, something you already know, but increase impervious area means, whereas before very little went to runoff, and 100% impervious, a lot goes to runoff. So low impact development, rain gardens, bioretention, trying to mimic that pre-development hydrology. To do that, you have to encourage the water to not run off. So you have a shallow depression, route the water into that either via overland flow or via pipe flow. You mine them in the soil if it's a pretty tight soil. If it's a sandy soil, you don't necessarily amend it. You put in native plants to increase evapotranspiration, and as those roots decay and regenerate, then you also get macropores. Benefits, as with most green infrastructure and low impact development, you decrease the runoff volumes, so you increase time to peak, those types of hydrology benefits. You get pollutant removal, and then it turns, I'm an engineer, so I don't really dwell on the attractive and educational landscape feature, but really that's another big component, is it turns what was a negative space or even a neutral space, and it turns it into something positive and something that could make people think about what happens to our stormwater runoff. So any rain garden, most rain gardens I should say, because designs vary, but most rain gardens are going to have some type of pretreatment structure. So they're going to have sediment forebay or a grass filter strip, something to kind of pre-treat the water, settle out sediment, because it's an infiltration-based control. You don't want it to clog too soon. Once the water enters the rain garden, it's going to be stored. That storage volume is determined by the outlet invert elevation. It's also determined by the surface area of the rain garden. Once it's stored there, it's going to infiltrate into the ground, and that's going to be affected by both the depth of the filter bed, so how far down did they excavate, how far did they amend the soil, and also the composition of the filter bed. Did they bring in sand and compost, or is it native soil there? Also the types of native plants, and this also goes a lot with how you want the rain garden to look. So the performance based on plants is going to have to do with how you want it to look and how you want it to be perceived, like a wild and woolly or a more manicured type look. And then some rain gardens have an under drain structure, so once it's infiltrated all the way to the bottom, if it has an under drain structure, it'll leave via the under drain structure. Otherwise, it'll just exfiltrate into the surrounding soil. Here's just some of the things we talked about. Sediment forebay, filter bed in the middle, usually some other volume around that. Now, effective bioretention in the literature and in practice, and I say effective, and really it depends on what you want to design it for. Are you targeting pollutants? Are you targeting a P90 storm, the 90th percentile storm? Are you targeting big storms, which isn't often done? But so it depends on what you're designing for. But in most cases, you have the contributing drainage area to the actual treatment area. It's about 20 to 1. Kind of maxes out for effective retention and treatment. Deeper filter beds are going to have more in-ground storage available. Reduced soil compaction, so in the construction process, did you have the excavator actually on top of the filter bed while you were digging out, or were you digging from the side? So you could reduce compaction by that method as well. And then some of the research rain gardens had an impermeable liner at the top to use for water balance. So they'd be able to capture everything that went through the rain garden. Why did we get into this project? And one of the big ones is there was no rain garden research or bioretention research in Kentucky at all. They're starting to become more popular, especially in Lexington, Fayette County, where University of Kentucky is, but there had been no research performed at all. Also, a lot of the research that's been done, as I mentioned before, have an underdrain and impermeable liner. So we wanted to look at a commercial scale rain garden, and we also wanted to look at one that did not have an underdrain or any impermeable liner at the bottom. And then Lexington was trying to determine if the design standards that they had, if they were good design standards. So we're trying to help them kind of refine and make those better. This is the project site. It's at a Coca-Cola distribution facility in Lexington, and we were collecting runoff from the roof and also from the parking lot. This is the rain garden, this is the warehouse roof, and then parking lot surrounding. However, we didn't take the whole parking lot and roof. We took this red area, about 15,000 square feet of parking lot, about 29,000 square feet of roof. This was then, the roof area was routed into a rainwater harvest tank. I'll touch on that a little bit more later. And after it went through the overflow on the rainwater harvest tank, went through a 12-inch pipe into the rain garden. We also had another about 27,000 square foot of roof and parking lot. That went directly through a drain into the rain garden. We also had this other little part that didn't want to cooperate and didn't go into the drain. It just went overland flow into the rain garden. It wasn't planned, but that's life and research and stuff. So this is the part that they actually excavated and amended. 4,000 square feet in the middle. The total is about 10,000 square feet. So it's pretty big size rain garden. And then if the rain garden ever got to the point 18 inches, a depth of 18 inches, it would then flow into this underground infiltration chamber, just to add more volume capacity to the rain garden. So something not as typical to most rain garden design and construction, they actually dug down 8 feet, which is pretty deep, but they only excavated or fluffed up the bottom 4 feet, and then the top 4 feet is what they actually amended. They amended, used a 25% sand, 25% compost, and then 50% the existing soil mixture. Design still 1.6 inches, so about a 9,400 cubic feet water quality volume. That's over that 70,000 square feet. And then the ponding depth, when it would reach the overflow, was 18 inches, as I mentioned before. At that depth, it would hold about 4,000 cubic feet. So in theory, every design storm should have gotten to that point if there was no infiltration whatsoever. What we found is it never reached that point. The water level never got to that 18 inches. This is the rainwater harvest system. I'm not going to get into it too much because I didn't actually take any data on this, but you can see the influent pipe, which goes into the coarse filter. This is a first flush, which was extremely undersized, but it was there. Once the first flush filled, it went on to the tank. Then they used, for truck washing, floor washing, they refilled their forklift batteries and also flushed a couple toilets. After the water level reached a certain point, it would then overflow down this pipe and back out to the rain garden. Not to get too much into my results already, but we found it was greatly underutilized. Most of the storms, only a small fraction was captured by the rainwater harvest system before it would begin flowing into the rain garden. This is the actual rain garden itself and the instrumentation setup. These are the 2 inlet pipes. We had a level troll which measured the subsurface water level in the middle. That's a beehive cover, which led to the infiltration chamber. So that's 18 inches from the bottom. Once it reached that point, it then flowed into the infiltration chamber. We also installed a soil moisture probe, which allowed us to get a really neat look at how moisture was held in the different soil layers over time. I'm not going to get into that because of time, but it was an interesting way to look at it. So this was a typical storm. I wouldn't say typical storm. This is one of the storms we've had. This is a hyetograph rainfall. The blue line here is inflow, and then the dashed line is water level. So you can see very responsive. It rains, flows in, water level rises, and then goes down. The way we calculated infiltration rates was the point that it stopped flowing in. We took that slope, just rise over run, until it leveled off. Down there you can see at the end. So we wanted to quantify how it was performing, and then we also wanted to compare how it actually performed to how it should have performed according to the Lexington Fayette Urban County Government Design Standards. It was about a year and 3 months that we monitored it. We had a pretty big number of storms, and we used about 56, well, I shouldn't say about 56, we used 56 storms in the analysis and had a pretty good both duration and depth. As far as inflow, if you remember, our design storm was about, the volume was about 9,400 cubic feet. So most of them were about a third of the design storm, give or take. And also, if you look at the total storage available before it goes into the infiltration chamber, most of them were able to fit in that without ever going to infiltration chamber. So that's what we found out. What Koch wanted to know was what's the total volume that this rain garden has captured? Like, what good is it doing? So the total volume captured by the rain garden, this is over about a year and 2 or 3 months, almost 2.4 million gallons of stormwater. But what we want to know is how many 2-liter bottles of Coke would that fill? So it's over 4.5 million 2-liter bottles of Coke was the amount of stormwater that was captured. So you could drink a 2-liter bottle of Coke for a long time and never reach, every day for a long time, and never reach the volume. And that's not recommended by the American Dental Association, but I like Coke. Anyways, infiltration rates, if you remember the design coefficient of permeability, 1.2 inches. What do we have up there? 9.5 inches per hour is the infiltration rate. So the design or the specification was basically way oversized the rain garden. Since we want to look at how it matches up with pre-development hydrology, we looked at evapotranspiration. This was just an estimation, but the highest value of evapotranspiration that we had was 16% in August, and that's percentage of total influent. If you remember back to that first slide, the pre-development hydrology, evapotranspiration was up in the 30–40%. So if we really want to match pre-development hydrology, this isn't doing it, and mainly because infiltration was so high. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we just need to redefine how we want to look at performance of low impact development. So I think I went really fast. How am I doing on time?
You went
great, awesome. Okay, great, because I'm on the conclusion side, so this is good. So basically what we found out was it was oversized based on how it was designed, and so it had a huge capacity for capturing and infiltrating stormwater runoff. The ratio of contributing drainage area to treatment area was about 17:1, which that lines up with what's seen in the literature, but the infiltration rates were much higher, and we're not exactly sure why. We think because they dug up the bottom 4 feet, that had a big impact. So we want to know how that's going to be affected over time. Since there was nothing added there, it didn't actually change the bulk density of the soil or any soil characteristics. We want to know if that's going to settle and compact over time. As I mentioned, the rainwater harvest system was only at its best when it was empty. It was only capturing maybe 20% on a good storm. It was only capturing about 20% of the rain that fell. And so I didn't talk a lot about the rainwater harvest system, but our opinion was they could have looked at more uses before installing it, or maybe installed a smaller one. And then soil testing. So maybe not just specifying a sand soaked clay mix, but maybe actually doing some type of simple infiltrometer test or something like that would maybe be a better way to go. It would add cost, but maybe they could shrink the rain garden, so they wouldn't have to have as much excavation. So basically high performing as far as hydrology, and we estimated that they could actually increase the receiving body or the receiving drainage area by about a factor of 5. They could 5 times. It could take 5 times and still, and then just then utilize the full amount of the rain garden. So that's it, and I'll welcome any questions.
What was, maybe I missed it, what was the goal as far as scope was concerned for this project?
So it's more PR than anything, I think.
So their goal is just to get more infiltration.
Their goal is to get, their goal is to decrease the amount of water that was leaving the site. So, and they did it through a grant from Lexington, the county government, and they were encouraged by Lexington to do it, and so it was,
So can you, there's something I've missed, I'm not understanding. You said it
Certainly.
captured about 20% of the runoff, right?
the
system did.
no, the system itself captured all the runoff.
It captured all the runoff.
The rainwater harvest system, the tank, captured only about 20% on a good, like if it was completely empty,
Right.
and if they'd used it all the way down to the bottom, it only would have captured about 20%. So essentially,
So it was all going to the rain garden.
mostly,
Because
yes.
they weren't using the tank.
Exactly.
They weren't using the water out of the tank fast enough.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. But the rain garden never overflowed or never even got to the point that it entered the infiltration chamber over the study period.